Now let's take a look at scope and variables and how the two work together in some Visual C++ code. Now this is going to be a two-parter, and in the first part I'm going to write some code and set it up, and then in the second part we'll kind of do a few more tricks with it to help you understand it. Now, to get you started, just understand, like all the other examples in the course so far, I created just a basic Win32 application, just the way I've done all the others. You can go look at any of the other examples and see how I set those up. Now, I named the project Interesting Scope, and if you will go to your work files folder, you will see some projects out there, and you will see Interesting Scope, and in it I have a code file, scope.cpp, and that's what I'm working in right here. So let's do this. Let's just kind of start writing some code. Now what I want to do is show you some things where scope and even the way you use your variables can get you in trouble, and this shows you why we like to name our variables unique names and why we have to be cognizant of what's going on with scope. Okay, first thing I want to do is I want to create an integer called a and set it equal to 1. I can either do equals 1 or I can do it this way. All right, doesn't matter. And then I'm going to do something that has to do with a function that I'm going to create later. Don't worry about what I'm doing here. We'll talk about it when we get to functions later on in the course. All right. Now, what I've done here is I've told it that even before you begin the code right here, start to run this program by looking into the main function. All right. I am going to go ahead and create a variable here and then set up a function right here. All right. But first of all, let's go out and use this. I'm going to call standard cout, and I'm going to push into that declared outside main a equals, sorry you have to watch me type and peck my way through this. Now this is pretty straightforward, right? Not a whole lot going on, but let's make it kind of interesting. Let's now set int a to 2. Now your first reaction coming from other languages is going to say, wait a minute, this is going to fail because you already have a variable called a and you're creating another variable called a. This one you set to 1 and this one you set to 2. This is not going to work. Well, alas, it does work in C++, and I will show it to you in just a second. So what I'm going to do is copy this one, bring it down here and just paste it, and then I'm going to change my description so that we can see it. Set to 2 inside main. And notice I'm just calling a again, and then what I'm going to do is come down here and return 0, which will kick me out, and we will now run this. Okay, so what I'm going to do is run it, and that will compile it, and you will see down here if everything goes okay. Yes, there's our code 0, so we look okay here. And again, the Windows 7 trick, I'm going to go into Windows Explorer, go into Documents, Visual Studio 2010, then I will go into my projects, and there you see Interesting Scope, and I'll open that, and my executable is in debug here, so I'm going to back up to debug, hold down the shift key, right click on debug, and say open command window here. This just keeps me from having to type all the CDs and so forth in DOS to get here. Now what I'm going to do is type the name Interesting Scope. Notice I don't have to use all caps or any of the caps, it's not case sensitive, and hit it. Now notice what's happening here. Let me get back out to my code. All right, when I declared the variable a outside of main, and then as soon as I jumped into main I wrote the variable out, okay, right here, you can see that declared outside main a equals 1. Right after that I came to right here, set a equal to 2 inside main, and then just wrote that out to the console, and notice set to 2 inside main a equals 2. All right, now what's happened is this a right here is masking this a right here. Now that is a very real possibility in C++, and you have to be careful with that. Okay, now let's make it just a little more interesting. And let's jump inside here and let's nest something. All right, and I'll push this up to make it a little more obvious. And inside here we will set int a to 3, and then we will do our std out, and I will just copy this, put it right here, and then I will say set to 3 nested inside main. All right, and we will once again run it, and that'll compile it for us. Jump back out. I will just call interesting scope again and hit it, and now notice if I don't scroll up out of the way, and let me scroll up so we can see just the one we just ran. There is the first one declared outside main. That's this variable. It's 1. Here's the one that's set to 2 inside main right here. It's masked it. It's now saying it's 2, and then we're going to mask it again inside this particular block, and it is 3. All right. Now the scope of all these, this one will stay there, right, until I call some code outside that, and we will do that in part 2. So join me there. Welcome to When Scope Gets Interesting part 2. Now in part 1 we started writing some code, and I talked to you about the concept of variable masking and what can happen by using the same names on variables. Now obviously this is not something we want to do, but I wanted you to see that it would happen. You're not getting any warnings about this. It's just masking those variables. Okay, now we'll do one more thing here, and that is let me go just grab an output line here, and let's put it right here and just say a equals. All right, and I'm going to build this, and then notice while it's building, we'll talk about this in a minute. What I have done here is I've got a in about 9 different places. Pretty sloppy programming. I've got it here, it's equal to 1, here it's equal to 2, here it's equal to 3. Now what will it be equal to right here? All right, well, it's going to be equal to 2 because it's in this particular block. This one has gone out of scope. All right, so what I'm going to do is come out here, I'm going to clear my screen, and I'm going to call interesting scope again, and then you will notice just like I predicted, it's not that I'm psychic or psychotic, it's just that I know that this is going out of scope. Okay, notice our first one here is 1, and then declared outside main, then set to 2 inside main right here. It's set to 2 inside main equals 2. Here's 3. This one is in scope inside these 2 braces, is to 3. And then this one, when we called a again, it was back to 2. Why? Because this is the one that's in scope now. Now let me click here and let's do something else. Let's try to let's do something else here to talk about scope. Let's do an integer b and set it equal to 2. All right, and let's come right here, and then let's just check what b equals to. Then we'll call b here, and you will see that we're not going to have any problems with this. This is a little bit elementary, but I want to make sure you get your head around this, because this kind of stuff can absolutely wipe an afternoon out. Okay, so notice I've set b equal to 2, and right there is my b equals 2. All right, notice it's right under the a equals 3 where we set it right here. Now here's what I want to show you though. If I come outside of this and try to set b equal to 4 and compile, let's see what happens here. It's going to throw an error. Now what's my error going to be? I don't want to continue. It is going to throw me an error about b. It's saying I have an undeclared identifier. Now what's going on is because it's talking about, notice where my underline is, this b right here. It says, wait a minute, I don't see a b here. Well, right here it is. There's where I created it. However, it has fallen out of scope because it's outside of these. Okay, so anyway, that is what I want you to see and understand about using scope here. All right, now let's do one more thing. And if you remember way back in the first part of this video, two-part video set here, I created this little guy up here. Well, what I want to do is come down here and get outside my main subroutine, or my main function, not subroutine, and I'm going to create a function that I can call another variable with. And I'm just going to do this. We'll talk about exactly what I'm doing a little bit later on, and we're just going to return a. Okay, and then to actually be able to use that, I am going to jump back up here into my main portion, and let me make this go away so that you can see the code here. Notice that I have put this. Let me shrink all this up a little bit so you can see. There we go. Notice I have put this function a value outside of my main function, and I'm going to correct this problem right here. I'm just going to overwrite this, and I'm just going to set a equal to a value, and I will call that. All right, so I'm going to get an a here, and actually what I can do with this, there's a better way. Instead of having to watch me stumble over this, there's a better way to do that. Okay, and I'm just going to put the a value result is, and I will call a value right here. Okay, now let's build that and let's see what I fat fingered here. And looks like I didn't fat finger anything, and this will be kind of interesting. I will clear this out, run it again, and now notice the a value result is 1. Okay, now let's look at this. How did this get to be 1? It was 2 here, it was 3 here, and then this one right here says it's 2. If we go back to that, look, the one right after says it's 2. Why is it showing 1? Well, because we declared it up here as 1, and then notice we called it outside the main right here, and so this particular scope still sees it as 1. Now, make sure you let all this sink in, go through this and play with it, and make sure it's all making sense to you. All right, scope and masking can be pretty interesting together.